Human mechanic fist-bumped the alien woman, without knowing she was the new Galactic Queen. The trade station known as Helix Gate never slept. Lights stayed on at all hours, ships came and went like slow-moving stars, and the air always carried the smell of metal, coolant, and 100 different alien atmospheres forced into uneasy balance. It was one of the few places in the galaxy where many species could stand in the same corridor without starting a war. Humans were still new here. Most aliens saw humans as useful but strange. They spoke too directly, stood too close, and treated rules like suggestions. Still, when something broke that should not be fixable, station control often sent for a human. Evan Calder was one of those humans. He worked as a mechanic in the lower engineering ring, where gravity sometimes flickered and pipes groaned like old animals. Evan had grease on his hands more often than not and never bothered to fully clean it off during his shift. He wore a faded work jacket with a Human Repair Guild patch stitched crookedly onto the shoulder. He was not important, at least not by galactic standards. That morning, Evan was elbow-deep in a grav lattice stabilizer when station control sent an urgent message to his wrist display. A power fluctuation had hit one of the docking arms, and a visiting ship was stuck half-locked, half-drifting. The species aboard was listed as high priority, which usually meant political trouble. Evan sighed, pulled his hand free, and grabbed his tool case. "Guess I'll finish you later," he muttered to the stabilizer. The docking arm was surrounded by security drones when he arrived. Tall aliens in formal robes stood back in rigid formations, their crests lifted in alarm. Evan noticed right away that none of them were doing anything useful. They were just watching the problem very intensely. One of the station overseers, a thin insect-like being with polished armor plates, turned toward him. "The human technician has arrived," it said, voice tight. Evan nodded. "Yeah, what's broken?" The overseer hesitated. "We are not entirely certain." "Fair enough," Evan said. "Point me at it." He stepped past the officials, ignoring the shocked clicks and hisses behind him, and knelt near the docking arm's exposed panel. The problem became obvious within seconds. The gravlock coils were misaligned, likely stressed by an emergency maneuver. Alien tech tended to be precise but fragile. As Evan started working, he became aware of someone standing nearby. Not a guard, not an official, just a tall alien woman watching him quietly. She was different from the others. Her clothing was simple, almost plain, and she wore no visible symbols of rank. Her skin shimmered faintly like polished stone under soft light, and her eyes reflected colors Evan could not name. Still, she stood too straight, too calm, like someone used to being obeyed. "Power relay S out of phase," Evan said without looking up. "Nothing dangerous, just annoying." The alien woman tilted her head. "You speak as if this device were simple." "It is," Evan replied, "just picky." She made a soft sound that might have been amusement. "Most engineers required 3 specialists before declaring it unrepairable." Evan shrugged. "Then they gave up too fast." She stepped a little closer, ignoring the sharp gestures from nearby officials. "You are not concerned about who I am?" Evan finally looked up. "Should I be?" There was a pause. Several nearby aliens looked like they might faint. The woman studied him, then said, "No, I suppose you should not." Evan went back to work, explaining as he adjusted the coils. He talked the way he always did, breaking down complex systems into simple ideas, sometimes using his hands to show motion. He did not notice how unusual it was for someone of her species to be spoken to so casually. She listened carefully. No one had spoken to her like this in years. When the final alignment clicked into place, the docking arm hummed and locked properly. The trapped ship stabilized and the warning alarms faded. "There we go," Evan said, standing up and stretching. "All good." Around them, the officials erupted into frantic communication. Relief mixed with panic. Something had been fixed, but something else had gone very wrong, and they could feel it. Evan wiped his hands on his jacket and turned to the alien woman. She was smiling. Not a practiced expression, not a ceremonial one, a real smile. "That was impressive," she said. "Thanks," Evan replied. "You held up pretty well, too. Most folks get nervous when alarms go off." She glanced around at the stiff, silent crowd. "I have lived with louder alarms than these." Evan nodded, then did something without thinking. He lifted his hand, curled it into a loose fist, and held it out between them. "Good teamwork," he said. "Fist bump." The universe seemed to stop. The nearby officials froze. Security drones halted mid-motion. Several aliens made sharp, fearful sounds. For her species, physical contact was strictly regulated. For someone of her position, though Evan did not know it, such contact was unthinkable. The alien woman stared at his fist. In her mind, 1,000 laws, traditions, and warnings screamed at once. Touch meant claim. Touch meant equality. Touch meant defiance of everything the galaxy had built around her. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her own hand. She formed her fingers into a shape that mirrored his, though it was not natural for her kind. Then she tapped her knuckles gently against his. The contact was brief, barely a moment, but it echoed. Gasps rippled through the dock. One official collapsed. Another began transmitting emergency signals at maximum priority. Evan blinked. Was that not okay?" The alien woman lowered her hand and looked at him with something close to wonder. "No," she said softly. "It was perfect." Before Evan could ask what she meant, security finally surged forward. Drones moved into position and officials shouted overlapping commands. Evan felt hands grab his arms. Hey, what's going on?" he protested. "I fixed the problem." The alien woman raised her voice, and the sound cut through the chaos like a blade. "Stop!" Everything stopped. Every drone powered down, every official froze mid-motion. Evan stared at her, surprised. She turned to the crowd, her posture changing. The calm presence became something heavier, undeniable. "I will return to my quarters," she said, "and this human will not be harmed." One of the officials trembled. "Why, Your Majesty?" Evan's stomach dropped. He looked at her. "Wait, Majesty." She met his eyes again, and this time there was apology there. "I did not lie," she said, "but I did not tell you everything." The officials bowed as one, pressing themselves low. Evan stood there, stunned, grease still on his hands. "You're the queen?" he asked. "The newly crowned Galactic Queen," she replied. Silence stretched. Evan let out a slow breath. "Huh!" That was all he managed. She almost laughed. Guards escorted her away, leaving Evan surrounded by stunned silence. No one touched him now. No one would meet his eyes. As she disappeared down the corridor, the queen glanced back once. She lifted her hands slightly. Not a wave, not a command, a fist. Evan stared at it, heart pounding, realizing far too late that the galaxy had just changed, because he had treated the most powerful being in known space like a regular person. And somewhere deep within the station, alarms began to sound again. This time not for machinery. But for politics, the station did not explode. No alarms tore the halls apart. No ships fired weapons. That silence was worse. Evan Calder sat alone in a small holding room near station security, his tool case resting by his feet like a loyal animal that did not understand why it had been arrested. The walls were smooth and pale, designed to calm nervous species. They were failing badly. He replayed the moment again and again in his head. The fist bump, the smile, the word majesty. "I fist bumped a queen," he muttered. Outside the room, the station was in chaos. Messages crossed space at the highest priority level. Governments demanded answers. Religious councils argued over meaning. Legal systems that had not been questioned in thousands of years suddenly found themselves shaking. Because of a gesture, because of a human. Two guards stood outside the door, tall and armored, their faces hidden behind glowing masks. They did not look at Evan. They did not speak to him. They treated him like a dangerous object that might explode if touched wrong. Hours passed. Finally, the door opened. The same insect-like overseer from before stepped inside, his posture stiff in a way Evan had never seen. He did not sit. "You are to be released," the overseer said. Evan blinked. "That's it. For now," the overseer replied. "You are under observation." "Yeah," Evan said slowly. "That makes sense." As Evan stood, the overseer hesitated. "You are aware," he said carefully, "that your actions have caused a significant disturbance." Evan nodded. "I get that, I really do, but I didn't know." The overseer studied him. "That is what terrifies them most." Evan was escorted back into the station proper. Everywhere he walked, conversations stopped. Aliens stared openly now, not with anger, with uncertainty. He felt like a rock dropped into still water, watching the ripples spread farther than he could see. News spread quickly among humans, too. Messages flooded human channels. "What did you do? Are you alive? Did you really fist bump the queen?" Evan ignored most of it. He went back to his workshop, sat on his stool, and stared at a half-finished repair he could not remember starting. 2 days later, a formal summons arrived, not an arrest order. An invitation. The queen requested his presence. The chamber where the meeting took place was nothing like the holding room. It was vast and open, with soft light flowing like water across the walls. Representatives of dozens of species stood in arranged arcs, careful to keep their distance from the center. At the center stood the queen. Velthira wore ceremonial attire now, layers of glowing fabric and symbols that marked her authority. She looked taller somehow, heavier. As if the room itself leaned toward her, Evan entered alone. Every eye followed him. He walked forward with slow steps, his hands empty, his work jacket clean but still worn. He stopped where the floor markings ended, unsure what to do next. The silence stretched. Then Velthira stepped forward. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Queens did not approach. Others approached them. She stopped an arm's length from Evan. "You may speak," she said. Evan cleared his throat. Hi." Several officials flinched. Velthira's eyes softened. "Just a little. Hello, Evan." She turned to the gathered representatives. "This human did not insult me. He did not challenge my authority. He treated me as a person while believing I was powerless." Murmurs filled the chamber. "One simple gesture," she continued, "revealed the truth of his species." A tall delegate stepped forward. "That gesture violated sacred distance laws," it said sharply. "If such acts are permitted, hierarchy itself—" "Hierarchy," the queen interrupted, "is a tool, not a truth." Silence slammed down like a physical force. She looked back at Evan. "Tell them why you did it." Evan swallowed. "I didn't think," he said honestly. "The job was done. It felt like a good moment. Humans do that. It's how we say we work together." The queen nodded. "No fear. No worship, no calculation." She raised her voice. "That is what frightened you." Anger rose among some delegates, fear among others. Something else stirred too. Hope. "You cannot change galactic law with a fist bump," one voice shouted. Velthira turned slowly. "I already have." She declared the gesture a recognized act of mutual respect, one that could not be punished without rewriting fundamental legal assumptions. The compact's own rules tied status to behavior, and Evan's behavior had forced equality into the record. The laws bent. They did not break, but cracks spread. Over the following weeks, the galaxy reacted. Lower castes began copying human customs in secret. Workers shook hands. Soldiers shared food. Engineers called supervisors by name. In places long silent, voices rose. And always humans were there. Fixing machines, treating everyone the same, never kneeling unless tired. Human embassies refused ceremonial prostration. Human crews ignored titles unless required for clarity, not from rebellion, from habit. Evan did not become famous by choice. His image spread anyway. Some called him reckless, others called him brave. Humans mostly called him that guy. He hated interviews, he hated attention. The queen called him again, this time privately. They met in a quiet observation chamber overlooking stars drifting like scattered fire. "I am changing the compact," she told him. Evan scratched the back of his head. "I figured. Many will resist," she said. "Some already plot against me." Evan frowned. "That sounds bad." "It is," she admitted, "but it is necessary." She turned to him. "I need humans." Evan looked surprised. "Me? Your species," she said. "You remind others of what they forgot. That power does not make one more alive." Evan considered this. "We're not trying to fix the galaxy." She smiled faintly. "You already are." She held out her hand, not a command, not a symbol, a fist. Evan smiled, relief flooding him, and bumped it gently. This time the act was recorded, broadcast, seen. No one screamed, no one collapsed. The galaxy breathed. Months later, a new phrase entered galactic records. Human standard interaction. It described communication without hierarchy assumption. Cooperation without ritual dominance. Respect given before demanded. Some civilizations rejected it. Others embraced it fully. Human mechanics became negotiators. Human medics became neutral ground. Human ships were welcomed into places once closed by tradition alone. Evan eventually returned to his workshop. The gravlattice stabilizer still waited. He finished the repair, wiped his hands, and leaned back, listening to the quiet hum of systems working as they should. Somewhere far above, a queen rewrote history. And somewhere deep in the station, a human mechanic proved that the most powerful force in the galaxy was not weapons, fleets, or crowns. It was the simple refusal to see anyone as untouchable. And that was how humanity became dangerous, not because they sought power, but because they never believed anyone else deserved it more. Change did not come quietly. For a time, it seemed as if the galaxy had accepted the new way. Human standard interaction spread slowly but steadily, like heat through cold metal. Some worlds adopted it fully. Others allowed it only in trade zones or mixed species stations. A few outlawed it completely. And then the backlash began. Evan Calder first felt it when 3 supply contracts were suddenly canceled without explanation. Then a human medical ship was denied docking rights at a station it had served for years. Rumors spread through human channels of quiet arrests, vanished reform leaders, and councils meeting behind sealed doors. The old powers were afraid. Evan stood in his workshop, listening to the low hum of tools and engines, feeling a weight he had never asked for. He was just a mechanic. He fixed things. He did not plan revolutions. But revolutions, he was learning, did not always ask permission. The Queen summoned him again. This time she did not hide the danger. "The High Conquered is forming," Velthira said, her voice steady but tired. "A coalition of species that believe hierarchy must be preserved at any cost." Evan leaned against a railing, staring out at the stars. "Let me guess. They're not fans of fist bumps. They call it contamination," she replied. "They claim humanity spreads disorder." Evan snorted. "We spread questions, big difference." "They intend to force a vote," she said, "to outlaw human standard interaction across the compact. To isolate your species." Evan's jaw tightened. "And you?" "I will oppose them," she said simply, "but I will not win alone." Evan was quiet for a long moment. "So what do you want from me?" She looked at him. "I want you to do what you always do," he frowned. "Fix things." "Yes," she said, "but not machines." The Conquered announced its summit on the world of Trellis Prime, a place known for strict caste law and rigid ceremony. Attendance was mandatory for compact members. Observers were allowed, but only under strict rules. Humans were invited last. Evan traveled as part of a human technical delegation, officially there to ensure infrastructure compatibility. Unofficially, they were there to stand in plain sight. When Evan walked into the summit hall, the air felt heavy with old power. Raised platforms separated delegates by rank. Servants moved silently along prescribed paths, eyes downcast. Humans stood on the floor, not because they were forced to, because they refused the platforms. Whispers followed them. The Conquered representatives spoke first. They spoke of tradition, stability, and order. They spoke of how the galaxy had survived for millennia without humans. They spoke of chaos disguised as kindness. Then Velthira rose. She did not shout. She did not threaten. She told a story. She spoke of a queen who had felt alone among her own people, of a moment when no one dared speak freely, of a simple human gesture that carried no hidden meaning, no demand. She spoke of trust. Then she did something no ruler had ever done at a summit like this. She stepped down from the platform. Gasps echoed through the hall. She walked across the floor and stopped in front of the human delegation, in front of Evan. "You taught me something," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "That authority which cannot be questioned is weakness." She extended her fist. Evan did not hesitate. When their fists met, the room erupted. Some delegates shouted in rage. Others stood frozen. A few, very few, stepped down from their platforms as well. The vote proceeded anyway. The Conquered had numbers. The ban passed by a narrow margin. Human standard interaction was declared illegal in Conquered-controlled space. The galaxy fractured. Trade routes split. Alliances hardened. Some expected war. Humans did not respond with fleets. They responded with absence. Human crews withdrew from Conquered systems. Human engineers stopped fixing Conquered machines. Human medics no longer crossed Conquered borders, not as punishment, as policy. At first, the Conquered celebrated, then things began to break. Their systems were complex and beautiful and fragile. Their hierarchies slowed decision-making. No one spoke outside their rank. No one took responsibility without permission. A grav-array failed on Trellis Prime. No one dared touch it. The Queen watched reports scroll across her display, her expression unreadable. "They will ask," Evan said quietly. "They already have," she replied. The Conquered sent a request, not a command, not a threat. A request for human assistance. The compact debated. Humans responded with conditions. No kneeling, no caste separation, no punishment for equal speech, just work. The Conquered refused. Their world went dark for 6 hours when the array finally collapsed. In that darkness, something else collapsed too: fear. When the lights returned, the Conquered sent a second request. They accepted the conditions. Human ships arrived. Human engineers walked openly among all ranks. They explained problems clearly. They asked questions. They listened. Lower castes spoke for the first time in public. Nothing exploded. No gods fell from the sky, the galaxy watched, the band quietly dissolved, years passed, the compact did not become perfect, hierarchy still existed, power still gathered where it always had, but something had changed. People remembered that things could be different. Evan grew older. His hands stayed steady. His hair grayed. He trained younger mechanics who never knew a galaxy without human standard interaction. One day, a young alien apprentice asked him why humans never bowed. Evan thought for a moment. Because if someone needs us lower to feel taller, he said, they're already small. The apprentice nodded, filing that away like a tool for later. On the anniversary of the first fist bump, the Queen visited Helix Gate again. No disguises this time. No secrecy. She stood beside Evan in his workshop, watching him finish a repair. You never asked for any of this, she said. Evan smiled. Still don't. And yet, she said, history will remember you. Evan wiped his hands and shrugged. History's got a bad memory. People remember what they need. She extended her fist one last time. He bumped it gently. Outside the station, ships moved freely, species mixed without fear. Conversations crossed lines that once felt impossible. The galaxy had not been conquered, it had been introduced. And humanity's greatest weapon had never been strength or speed or fire. It had been the quiet belief that no one was above a simple human gesture. And that belief changed everything. Time changed the galaxy in ways no vote ever could. Human standard interaction stopped being something new or strange. It became normal in places where people worked together every day. Trade hubs, repair yards, mixed academies, and deep space stations adopted it without ceremony. Not because they were told to, but because it made things easier. Still, not everyone accepted it. Far from the core systems, beyond the comfortable reach of the compact, there were regions where old thinking ruled hard and deep. In those places, hierarchy was law and law was fear. That was where the crisis began. Evan Calder no longer crawled through tight maintenance tunnels every day. His knees complained too much for that. He still worked, but now he mostly supervised, taught, and fixed problems that required more thought than strength. When the emergency signal reached Helix Gate, he was adjusting a calibration screen and drinking bad station coffee. The signal was not loud. It was worse. It was formal. A neutral system called Caro's Reach had lost control of its star stabilizer array. Without it, the local sun would become unstable within days. Millions of lives depended on it holding together. The message requested human assistance. Evan read the attached details and frowned. Caro's Reach was not part of the compact. It was ruled by an old council of ascendants, a strict caste-based authority that had never accepted human standard interaction. Humans were allowed only as labor, never as equals. They won't listen, one of the younger engineers said. They never do, Evan nodded slowly. But their star doesn't care about rank. The Queen's message arrived an hour later. I will support whatever choice humanity makes, Velthira wrote. But understand this, if the stabilizer fails, the consequences will echo across nearby systems. Evan closed the message and looked around the workshop. Humans, aliens, and mixed species techs worked side by side. No one bowed. No one demanded titles. This is going to hurt, he said quietly. The human delegation arrived at Caro's Reach under heavy guard. The station orbiting the system was old, massive, and filled with symbols of authority carved into every surface. Humans were directed to the lower ring. Evan walked anyway. When the council chamber doors opened, the contrast was sharp. Ascendants sat on raised platforms, their robes heavy with meaning. Servants stood below them, eyes fixed on the floor. The star stabilizer schematics floated in the center of the room, slowly blinking warnings. Evan stepped forward. I'm Evan Calder, he said. We're here to fix your problem. A tall ascendant leaned forward. You will address us properly. Evan glanced at the failing data feed. With respect, your star doesn't have time for ceremony. A hiss of anger rippled through the chamber. You forget your place, another ascendant said. Evan nodded. Happens sometimes. They ordered him to kneel. He did not in defiance, just because he never thought to. The council threatened to remove human access. Evan did something unexpected. He turned and walked away. The humans withdrew from the chamber and returned to their ship. They did not sabotage anything. They did not argue. They waited. Hours passed. The stabilizer degraded further. Lower-ranking technicians began to panic. They knew the systems. They knew what was coming, but they could not speak without permission. One of them, a young alien engineer with shaking hands, broke protocol and ran to the human ship. "Our superiors will not listen," the engineer said. "But we will die if nothing is done." Evan listened. Then he made a choice. He opened the ship's bay. "We'll help," he said, "but not like this." Human engineers and medics stepped out and moved directly to the stabilizer control nodes. They spoke openly with local technicians, ignoring rank. They asked questions. They shared tools. The Ascendants raged. They ordered security to stop the humans. Security hesitated, because the humans were already working, because the star was already stabilizing. Because for the first time, the lower castes were speaking, and no disaster followed. The final repair required manual recalibration inside the core chamber. The radiation levels were dangerous, but survivable with proper timing. The Ascendants argued over who had the authority to approve it. Evan did not wait. He went in with 3 others. They fixed the array. The star stabilized. The system lived. When Evan emerged, exhausted and glowing faintly from shielding residue, the council chamber was silent. Millions of lives had just been saved by people who had not bowed. One Ascendant finally spoke. "You broke every law of our society." Evan nodded. "Yeah. And yet," the Ascendant continued slowly, "you saved us." "Yes," Evan said, "we did." The council fell into chaos. By the next cycle, the Ascendants issued a temporary decree allowing human standard interaction for technical operations only. It was meant to be limited. It did not stay that way. Lower castes learned they could speak without the sky falling. Problems were solved faster. Repairs were completed. Trade improved. The decree quietly expanded. Years later, Karo's Reach joined the compact under revised terms. Evan retired not long after. He did not attend ceremonies. He did not accept titles. He returned to Earth for a while, then settled on a quiet station where ships passed like slow thoughts. One day, a child asked him why everyone knew his name. Evan smiled and shrugged. "I fixed a thing once." The child frowned. "That's it." "That's usually it," Evan said. Far away, the Queen stood before a new council, one built on shared ground rather than raised platforms. She told the story again, not of power, not of rebellion, but of a mechanic who treated a stranger like a coworker. The galaxy had not changed because humans demanded it. It had changed because humans never asked permission to be decent. And that, more than any fleet or law, became humanity's legacy among the stars.